1st of August 2024, Amazon Prime premiered Batman Caped Crusader, a 2D animated Batman show that takes the Dark Knight back to his 1940s roots. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you may recall that I've reviewed this show in the past. However, that video has long since been deleted, simply because I didn't think my thoughts were valid, and I just didn't like the editing. With Season 2 right around the corner, I thought it'd be a good enough time as any to remake that video. So that's what I'm doing. This is my new review on Batman Caped Crusader. Batman Caped Crusader is the brainchild of some of the most legendary names in DC history. We have Bruce Timm, creator of Batman the Animated Series, Matt Reeves, director of The Batman, James Tucker, creator of Batman the Brave and the Bold, and J.J. Abrams, who was close to directing a Superman film but was ultimately cancelled. Either way, he's a part of this. Like I mentioned before, the show takes Batman back to his 1940s Golden Age roots. The suit itself is directly pulled from the original Detective Comics, although the series does borrow some characters from Batman's more recent history. Characters like Harley Quinn, Renee Montoya, and Lucius Fox to an extent. Now, when the show was being marketed, Bruce Timm described it as being more Batman the Animated Series than Batman the Animated Series, and naturally fans started assuming that it was another version of Batman the Animated Series, which just isn't true. What Timm meant was that it was his original vision for the show, before Warner Brothers came in and gave him all these mandates. This is evident in the original Writer's Bible for BTAS, which set the characters in a 1940s style Gotham. While I don't think Caped Crusader tops BTAS, although I don't think anything will, I do really like this show's style. And speaking of style, the show utilises the DC Animated Universe's art style, albeit more flat. The characters don't really move around a whole lot, and the lighting is rather dim. That being said though, I do like the characters' designs, and there are some pretty shots. When it comes to the characters' overall designs though, there are those who are 100% accurate, and those who feel like a complete recreation. Batman's design in particular is directly pulled from his first appearance in Detective Comics number 27. Same thing goes for Catwoman. Her costume is literally pulled from its first appearance in comic books. Clayface is mostly based on his original design, the only difference being is that his face is actually made out of clay as opposed to wearing a mask, and Onomatopoeia is just Onomatopoeia. Literally the only design difference is that he now wears a fedora. Needless to say, when the character designs are accurate, they're really accurate. But then you have characters who look completely different, like the Gentleman Ghost, who looks nothing like the Gentleman Ghost, the Penguin, who is a lazy now, and Two-Face, who has his scars on the opposite side of his face now. I think the main reason for these design changes was storytelling. The Gentleman Ghost, being a white suit and top hat on their own, just didn't come off as scary. But a glowing blue Victorian man charging at you on a horse definitely comes off as that. The Penguin being a father that drowns his children wouldn't have the same effect as if it was a mother doing it. Jesus, that came off dark. And as for Two-Face, well, I wholeheartedly believe that his scars being on the opposite side now are meant to reflect the changes made to his character. As it's not the scarred side that's evil here, it's the good side. Throughout this season, Harvey Dent has proven himself to be, in Barbara Gordon's own words, a complete arse. He took bribes, molested his co-workers, and gloated constantly about one day becoming mayor. However, towards the end of the season, things started to change. When crime boss Rupert Thorne offered him a bribe to let one of his men go, Harvey double-crossed him and walked away with the cash. And, in typical Two-Face fashion, gets half his face scarred. From here on out, the good side of Harvey that the show built up to is now viewed through the scarred side. And whenever Harvey does anything malicious, it's the good side that's taken full stage. A good example of this is in episode 9 when Harvey goes to kill Thorne. We get a close-up of his face and the good side is covered by the gun. The scarred side is fully visible. Harvey then hesitates to kill Thorne, but snaps out of it, and the good side is now shown. This is also evident in the season finale when Two-Face sacrifices himself to save Barbara. He dies in her arms, and it's the bad side that's mostly visible. Speaking of Barbara, she's a constant reoccurring character throughout the series, constantly helping Batman and becoming one of his closest allies. I don't really see this version of her becoming Batgirl anytime soon, and I think that's completely fine. I'm also completely fine with Jim Gordon starting off as a Batman hater, but slowly learning to work with the Dark Knight. More often than not, Jim is completely fine with Batman just being around, and yeah, that's part of his character. The idea that there's an authority figure that believes in him. But this idea works too. Now when it comes to the Caped Crusader himself, Batman is definitely the most unchanged so far. He definitely looks and feels like Batman. However, unlike most iterations, this one doesn't have, or at least doesn't start off having a solid relationship with Alfred. Because in the first season, Alfred is just the assistant, someone for Bruce to have dialogue with. Bruce doesn't even refer to him as his first name, just Pennyworth. That all changes in the season finale, however. After Batman finally learns to work with other people, he applies some of that same respect to his faithful butler, finally referring to him by his first name. With the exception of Jim Gordon and Renee Montoya, Gotham's police force is completely corrupt, and no two characters emphasise this more than detectives Harvey Bullock and Arnold Flass. Now, with Bullock, I don't really see him as being all bad. Like, yeah, he's not great, not at all, but he is shown to have some hesitance in some of the stuff he and Flass do. He may seem bad on surface, but in reality, I view him as just a lackey. Arnold Flass, however, is nowhere near sympathetic. This guy is just downright awful, and I think it's safe to say that he is the first season's main antagonist. We're talking about the type of guy who is willing to put another man in danger, only to kill him when the job is done, as well as taking out the Commissioner's daughter with no remorse. I mean, look at his face when he does it. Dare I say, Flass might even be worse than some of the costume criminals this year. Clayface is literally a murderer, Nocturna can take people's souls, and Firebug is an arsonist. But at the very least, they all had a reason for what they did. Clayface was rejected by his co-star, Nocturna needed souls to survive, and Firebug saw being on fire as what everyone wanted. God, this guy's a sick But Flass is just all around bad, with no redeeming qualities. Flass may have been bad, sure, but at least he was honest about it, which is more than I can say for this show's depiction of Harley Quinn. Rather than being a therapist turned mad by the Joker, this version of Harley is a therapist by day but a psycho by night, locking her patients up in cages so that she could humiliate them, which is her version of helping, if you will. I initially didn't like this change at first, but I've learned to appreciate it as its own version. In the final episode of the show, we're of course teased the Joker, experimenting with Joker Toxin, which appears to be fatal. Many people working on the show have constantly said the Joker is inspired by the original Golden Age version of the character, specifically from Batman #1. That version of the Joker was a largely different character compared to what we know now. He still looked like the Joker with his iconic green hair, purple suit and white smile, but as a character he was simply just a murderer. A clown-themed criminal who took joy out of watching his victims die with a smile. Obviously, the character has changed significantly since then, but it's fun looking back, and it's this version of the character the show seems to be adapting, and it looks like he's marketed as the main villain of Season 2. So, as a whole, Batman Caped Crusader is a love letter to the Golden Age, much in the same way that Batman the Brave and the Bold is a love letter to the Silver Age. It takes some creative liberties of course, but as a whole, this is very faithful. And while I don't love every change it did to the villains, I will say that they are at least different. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested to see what they do different with next season's villains. Particularly villains like Poison Ivy, Roxy Rocket, the Riddler, and of course the Joker. The series as a whole is a solid 7 out of 10. And with all that being said, that was my new review on Batman Caped Crusader. See you guys next time.